The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Stress 2 Logic and Firearm Mentor, your host. And a few weeks ago, I did an expo at the APCA conference, American Planners of College Activities, which was in Lincolnshire, Illinois. I also spoke my signature keynote, which is Overcoming the Hot Stress Mess. And there were a lot of other vendors there and speakers who are in a similar space as I am. One of the things that I do is I teach people how to get out of their cognitive fog in the middle of a stressful incident, whereas other people talk about making healthy choices, mental health, etc. And one of the people that I met there, his name is Dominic Syracuse. He's from Cognitive Behavioral Theater. How did I first see him or hear him? Well, I heard him down the hall laughing. He's got a very unique, contagious laugh, which I'm sure you'll hear in a few minutes on the radio. And I was like, who is this guy? But and I peeked into his room. His audience was extremely engaged. This guy is very engaging, very high energy. And actually, after one of his speaking gigs, he had a 10-minute kind of like a demo type thing. I said, you need to bring the energy up a little bit. And he's super high energy. So that's me being sarcastic. His booth backed up to mine. I heard some of the conversations continued high energy. I don't know if that was an act or if that's the real you, but we'll find out. So I'll start off with, so you've been to prison, and that'll get explained. What's your personal origin story? How did you get to where you are today? And talk about being an actor, a comic, and behavioral specialist, and what is your inspiration? Take it away.
Thank you. Absolutely, Marcus. First of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. Secondly, I was having to contain my laugh as you were talking about my laugh, because I was like, I didn't want to burst out and interrupt as you were saying that, but that's hilarious. My wife would disagree with you about the contagious part. It's more like, can you go outside and leave me alone? My origin story is kind of interesting. I've spent my entire life on stage. I used to play in rock and roll bands and do shows. I ended up getting my master's degree in acting in Los Angeles at a place called the Stella Adler Studio for Acting. Stella Adler is the acting teacher who trained everyone from like Marlon Brando to Mark Ruffalo, Benicio del Toro, any great actor whose name ends with O. That's what I say. Okay. Kevin Costner, O. You know, all the best. As I was there, though, they had this program that was called the Outreach Program, the Stella Adler Outreach Division, which went into maximum security prisons and taught acting inside of the prison systems of New York and LA. And to pay my way through school, I always did some type of social work, whether that was supporting people with disabilities or working with people in addiction and recovery. It was kind of my way of giving back, because acting can be a very solipsistic art form where it's like, you know, look at me kind of thing. So when I found out about the outreach program that went into prisons, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a way to blend both of my passions. So this is where I want to be. I begged them. I was like, please let me be a part of this program. I'll volunteer. I'll wait in line. I'll pay you. Just let me do this. And they were like, you are the only one interested. It's all yours. Go ahead. And so I was able to start. I started in 2015 inside of the maximum security prisons. And then after about 3 years of doing just acting classes inside of the prisons, they approached me and said, hey, we're getting more out of the guys from your acting classes emotionally than we are our anger management program. Would you be interested in teaching anger management? And I'm an actor. I can pretend like I know how to do that.
Right.
And they said, that's illegal. We have to train you. So I got trained by the Cognitive Behavioral Institute of California, where I learned cognitive behavioral therapy. And I realized how much of the cognitive behavioral principles were similar to the techniques I learned as an actor about controlling your mind, using your imagination to change how you feel in the moment, or, even just simple breathing techniques to keep your stress level low while you're in front of hundreds of people and that kind of stuff. And so what I started doing is I started using the acting and improv techniques I learned to teach cognitive behavioral therapy, called it cognitive behavioral theater. And since then, I've had the opportunity of being all over the place, from the military to nurses during the COVID-19 pandemic to the Bureau of Land Management, because that's where I thought my acting career would take me.
Have you read Danny Trejo's book?
I have not. It's funny you say this. I have not read Danny Trejo's book, but I have taught students who were locked up with him. That is a true story.
He's one of my favorite I think he's perfectly cast in the movies that he's awesome. In. And I absolutely love the fact that he climbed out of a life of crime, helping other people who are drug addicts. It's a fascinating book. I loved it. It was perfect. You already told us about your educational background, which is phenomenal. We discussed working in prisons. Talk about your work with the U.S. military.
When I first started, really for me it was just a matter of, I love acting. I'm obsessed with acting, and I always laugh when somebody asks me about all the places I've worked, especially the military, because when I went into acting, I kind of went in because I thought it was the cheat code to education. When I was in school, I was majoring in acting, and my best friend and roommate was getting his doctorate in biochemical engineering. And so we'd get home and he'd say something like, "Oh, today was so hard. I'm like learning about infectious diseases." And I'm like, "Oh, I pretended to bark like a dog today. I was walking through Jell-O." So I thought I just got to play around and have fun all the time. That was really what allured me to it. But what was really fascinating was when I started working in the prisons, that's when I initially started thinking, like, these guys are locked up 20 hours a day. I'm just going to give them a fun time in acting class. But I realized it was a lot more than that. It was giving people the opportunity to express themselves. It was giving people the opportunity to take their whatever raw emotions they have and learn to articulate them, learn to control them, learn to also empathize with other people when you hear someone else's story. And I realized that kind of translated into the corporate world and into what ended up becoming the military. I was working initially with a group that was a group of homeless students in Los Angeles, a place called Safe Place for Youth. And I was making them do silly stuff. We were, like I said, pretending to walk through Jell-O, right, or barking like dogs. And the very refined British woman who ran that facility came up to me and said, "I'd like to talk to you after this." And I thought I was in trouble. I was like, "Oh no." She's going to bring me in and say, like, these students need to learn practical life skills. They don't need to learn how to be silly or goofy or something. And instead, she brought me into her office and she said, "I have a pitch meeting for a bunch of potential investors, and I'm horrified of public speaking. Can you show me what you were showing them?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And she said, "Okay, what do you charge for one-on-one counseling?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "What do you pay
right.
for one-on-one counseling?" Because nobody's ever asked me this before. So I started working with her, and then it was through that connection that she got me involved with a whole bunch of other places. She suggested that I do a free, kind of like a free workshop for all these professionals who might be interested in learning just what she said, public speaking or building confidence when sharing things. So I did. I held a free event and invited business owners or whomever might be interested. And as fate would have it, a sergeant in the United States Air Force came up to me and said, "Hey, we are looking for emotional intelligence and effective communication training. I really think this is an interesting approach. Can you come and do a presentation for some of the people who are the decision makers? And I said, absolutely. And I went in and I just focused specifically on improvisation games that do a couple things. Number one, improvisation games that help you stay really calm in high pressure. So for instance, we'll set a rule and then I'll intentionally make it as chaotic as possible. And in order for you to do it, you have to stay calm in the chaos. And the goal of it is, when you're working with a group, how to not only stay calm yourself, but work together, get into flow state, that kind of thing. And the trick of it all is you're having a bunch of fun doing it. It's not a dangerous situation. It's like a really silly, fun, enjoyable situation. And when I did that presentation, to my surprise, the directors were like, all right, we're going to do a rodeo with you. We have 8 different divisions we want you to show this to. And so I ended up working with 8 different divisions of the United States Air Force, just seriously playing improv games with the sole purpose of keeping your cool in high pressure situations and then learning to communicate with each other on an emotionally intelligent level. And the hilarious part of all of it, I was very honored. They gave me a honorary medal and all sorts of wonderful stuff. But it was really cool. But the whole time in my head, I'm working with men in uniform, men and women. I'm working with like the logistics department, the helicopter squadron, medical, like really important stuff. And all I could think to myself was, my dad was so wrong. Acting is a practical career choice. Like the whole time, going back to me in school, man, I thought that this was just the most impractical thing to do, and I was just goofing my way through life. And actually, it turns out the skills that you learn as an actor are very practical and applicable to everyday life, especially when it comes to articulating yourself confidently.
It's interesting you said that. Well, what you described was actually what I call stress inoculation. You're putting people. Yeah, that's the term. Actually, that's a law enforcement term. You do high stress things and then work out cognitive activities. Real similar to what you just said. Feel free to use that as your phrase if you want to.
You call it stress inoculation?
Stress inoculation. And
stress inoculation. I thought that was something that you needed a pill for.
Well played, my friend. Well played. That was good. That was really good. So this is fascinating to me, and I mean, it really sounds like you're helping people and making an impact. And it's kind of funny how your dad, well, you didn't quite say this, but wasn't as supportive as he could have been with your acting career. And that's, the bottom line is you can still make a reservation and call yourself doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No one's got to know. No one's got to know. And to my dad's credit, my dad has always been very supportive of me doing this kind of stuff. It's just he's as any person who goes into the arts, I think he was more worried about whether or not I was going to be able to make money. That was the real worry. So, and then now that things are kind of going the direction they're going, it's really funny because now he's like, super supportive.
He sees your success, and the misperception of people is that, if you want to be an actor, that means you have to be an A-list actor in all the movies. You have to be Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and it's in my first marriage, my brother-in-law was a local Chicago actor, and I realized it's a lot bigger than just Hollywood. It's local theater. Yes. It is education, like you said. So it's not just who's in the movies. It's a ton of other things. And, hey, you never know. You might go to a restaurant and be served by an actor. That was a joke. Actors wait tables.
Hands down.
It's true.
If you are in New York, Chicago, or Los Angeles, and you go to a restaurant, you are 100% of the time being served by an actor.
It's kind of, I want to share something with everyone.
Yeah,
One of
please.
the police departments that I worked with was Glencoe, Illinois, and Glencoe
Okay.
is like, I don't know, 8-10 miles north of Chicago on Lake Michigan. It's the fourth largest per capita income suburb in the state. In other words, the guy who invented the Hoover vacuum, Mr. Hoover, lived there.
Okay. No way.
Actors, football, sports figures. So one guy opened a restaurant in the downtown area, which was within walking distance from the station. And okay, it's a new restaurant. We'll go check it out. His buddy and investor was Harold Ramis from
No
Ghostbusters.
way.
Yeah, well, he's a local Chicago guy. He lives in town, and he's a super nice guy. And so what he did was when that restaurant opened, Harold waited tables. And this isn't like back in the 1970s. This is he's already established. He's done the Ghostbuster stuff. He's a known, and he's waiting
Right.
tables. So he comes up to me, and I'm sitting there. I'm in a police uniform. And he's like, "Hi, can I take your order?" And I said to him, and he has a sense of humor because he's a comedian. I said, "And you are who?" And he made a big smile. I mean, he knew I was messing with him. But it's true. There's a connection in the restaurant business and in the acting business.
It's funny, I just got to interject because
Sure.
I got to tell you this story I like to tell because it's the best way of describing what it is to be a working actor because acting is a very silly. It's like I tell people in my workshops. Acting, just like basketball, is a game you play when you're a little kid, and if you get good enough, you can go pro. Acting's a game you play when you're a little kid. It's just playing make-believe. That's all it is. Just
Right.
like when we played pretend as kids. That's all it is. It's just, actors play pretend on the grand scale. And if you take it seriously, I mean, when you go to acting conservatory, they make you learn Shakespeare, and they make you study the ancient Greeks, and they make you study, like, Jungian philosophy. I mean, they take it real seriously. But at the end of the day, it's so that you can go have fun and play pretend well. You're always looking for gigs as an actor. I remember, this is the most actor story ever. When I was in Los Angeles, I got this paying gig. And at the time, it was a lot of money for me. It was something like $120 for the day. And it was a business expo in downtown Los Angeles where the whole thing was, business people are going to make a ton of money. So they wanted actors to dress up like nerds. So thick glasses,
So it wasn't that much of a stretch for you.
Yeah, exactly. I was typecast, which is unfortunate. No, they said they want nerdy actors to dress up, and we were in tubes, gigantic tubes that shot air, and there was Monopoly money, and we literally got paid to dance around as Monopoly money was flying all over the place. It was very silly. Well, the thing that was funny was I was there with an actor that I had just met. His name's Jordan Matlock. Now, if you look now, Jordan's got a very impressive resume. I mean, he's on shows on Netflix and CSI and all this stuff. But at the time, this is about 13, 14 years ago, we're sitting there, and he had just gotten out of a separate conservatory as me, and we are having these in-depth conversations about, what's your favorite Shakespearean monologue, and, what do you think about Henrik Ibsen, and, all these really in-depth things, and we're trading lines, and we're talking about, like, the philosophy of certain movies and directors and how they borrow from art to, famous paintings to make film and all this stuff. And then as soon as we're having coffee, having these deep conversations, and then they're like, boys, you're back on. And we're like, all right, let's go dance in tubes with Monopoly money now.
That's funny.
And so that's kind of the life of an actor when you're first starting out. But, to that point, that's also the interesting part of it is that's what I love what I'm doing now, because I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder teaching cognitive behavioral therapy, because while I am certified, and I got certified by the Cognitive Behavioral Institute, I don't have a PhD in psychology. And so I would always make sure that every single thing I said was so well researched and so evidence-based, and because I was so worried that people who do have a degree or a lifetime studying this stuff would not approve of me sharing it with people the way I do. But what was really fascinating was when I got reached out to by, for instance, the nurses during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Department of Health reached out, and I sat down, I had a meeting with them, and I was trying to be very technical, like as technical as possible. And I was saying things like, would you like to work on things like neuroplasticity,
right,
or would you like to work on balancing the nervous system, or polyvagal theory? Like I'm trying to show them that I know what I'm talking about. And it was the craziest thing. They said, hey, we heard you're a comedian, we just really want to laugh. We haven't laughed in a year and a half. Could you come and just make us laugh for a little bit? And I was like, yeah, that I can do, and then, and learning about how important that is. Now I realize that being a comedian, even if people come for an hour from their stressful lives and from the negativity you see in the news or online, just being able to take a break and have a really hearty laugh for an hour does just about as much good as a therapy session or an SSRI.
I'd even say better.
Yeah. So that's I'm learning that there's value deeper than what we like to kind of put on things with just, as I say in my speech, and as you heard me say, just the value and importance of enjoying life, because joy is the opposite of depression, right? So finding things to enjoy is extremely important.
Very good. I want my listeners to know that this is my dream, teaching people about safety. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for my listeners, I couldn't live my dream. So on behalf of my family and myself, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to live my dream. And I also want to continue to live my dream, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word of safety. Recently, I began a new service as a conference keynote speaker. So if anyone would like for me to speak at future events, or if anyone knows of an introduction or would like to discuss how we can work with one another, I'd love to do just that. The keynote speaking website is www.stress2logic.com. That is STRESS2logic.com. If you're aware of any conference speaking engagements where you'd like to have me speak, I'd love an introduction. You can always share my electronic business card, which is Marcus Melnick, MarcusMelnick.com. Now, back to the show. I know you've done some international work. What's the furthest you've traveled?
Well, okay, that's a very interesting question. I had the privilege, briefly, of doing an art therapy workshop for families of citizen soldiers in Ukraine. However, I could not travel there. As you can imagine, when there's a war going on,
right?
They were very hesitant about letting anyone in at all, especially because there's this understandable mistrust of anything that's coming from the outside. So when I did that, what I actually ended up doing, it was very fascinating, was there was a bunch of psychologists who were working at an art therapy clinic doing a bunch of different cool therapies for some of the families, everything from equestrian therapy to paint therapy to dance and stuff. So what I actually did was I did a clinic for them, for the instructors themselves, showing them some of my techniques, and then they took those techniques and used it with the family. So I can't say that I was there personally. I was actually just in my living room, showing these folks some of these techniques they can use. But I really hope that worked out well and was helpful. And I know that we had a really fun session, but that was the furthest that my work has ever extended. but I can't say I traveled there.
Well, fair enough.
That was
fair enough.
All from my living room.
But still, it was international work.
It was.
You talk about kind of affecting, you didn't quite say this, these are my words, but affecting people in a background type position where you trained other people. I had a student, and at a local high school, she stopped a mass shooting. She stopped it before it happened.
Are you serious?
She picked up on some behaviors that I taught that were just out of whack. And turns out this student gets up to go to the bathroom, and he was being really weird about his sweatshirt, which was on his desk. So she goes to the sweatshirt, unrolls it, firearm, loaded firearm. And she knew exactly what to do. She confiscated the gun. She made it safe. She unloaded it. The student got expelled and arrested, and he was there to... It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to bring a gun because someone threatened me, which also is not right. But he had intended on doing a mass shooting. So did I stop the mass shooting? No, absolutely not. But there was an impact that I had. And there's a whole aftermath to the story. But in any event...
That's unbelievable.
Yes, it is. It is. So when I get people and I tell them what I do, and they give a visible recoil, I say, you know something, though? I've trained police officers. I've trained members of the military. I've trained the Israeli soldiers. And then I also... And usually when I say that, and I'm in a group, I get a big round of applause that I had a student. She stopped the mass shooting because of the training that I provided. Similar to you, you helped a family, maybe not directly, but you certainly made an impact, and it's appreciated.
Well, no, I really appreciate that, and obviously I appreciate the work that you do, because that's absolutely incredible. But that's the whole thing about the butterfly effect, right? They say you change something as small as a butterfly's wing. I mean, I used to say this back when I had a chip on my shoulder about whether or not acting was like I always used to ask myself, what am I really doing that's going to make the world better by acting, by pretending to be someone else or something like that, before I did the work I did now. But the effects are so far reaching. For instance, there was a movie that was called The Motorcycle Diaries, about the life of Che Guevara.
Stay tuned, because when we return, we'll be continuing the story about Dominic's friend who did a motorcycle trip. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.